You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. What if discovering your metabolic type could be the secret to better health and well-being? Get all the details in today's episode. This episode contains strong language and listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Pytela Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we dive into the concept of metabolic typing and how understanding our unique metabolic needs can support overall health and vitality. We explore how different metabolic types respond to foods, lifestyle choices, and stress, and how recognizing these individual needs can guide us toward a balanced, energized life. We also cover the impact of metabolic health on areas like weight management, stress resilience, and longevity. This episode offers an insightful look at how aligning with our metabolic type can help us make more personalized choices for improved health and well-being. Martin Pytela is a respected functional medicine expert and metabolic typing coach whose mission is to restore vitality to you and the planet. With over 12,000 clients coached since 2011 and over 60,000 students enrolled in his Udemy courses, Martin has a wealth of knowledge to share on topics such as healing trauma, managing stress and anxiety, weight loss, metabolism, longevity, mindfulness, gut health, and overall health. Let's meet Martin Pytela. Hi, Martin. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because metabolic typing is actually something that I have never even heard about, and I'm so excited to chat with you about that. Thanks for being here today and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Petra. It's been really an honor because I think you're doing an awesome job of helping people understand just how important their emotional well-being is. In my head, it really is more important how your emotional health is, or how you're interacting with your subconscious, or how many terrible dragons you have hidden under the rocks, more than the physical stuff that I work with a lot. But still, it's important. Metabolic typing, in a way, is like getting a user's manual to your body, understanding if I do this, such and such will happen. There are answers to two questions that you get when you do the metabolic typing test. It's an online quiz. We offer it on our website, and you answer about 120 multiple choice questions. And we come back to you with, here's how you alkalize and here's how you acidify. It's the macronutrients, fats, proteins, and carbohydrates that regulate whether you acidify or alkalize and how. And acidification sends you into the stress side, the fight or flight side, the sympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system. So you will probably end up with anxiety or anger issues or impatience or just grit in life. And if you over-alkalize, you end up first in procrastination, then in maybe despondence, dark moods, and then out and out depression. So it's really important to know that how you combine foods on your plate, you can push more carbs or push more fats, and it will push you in one direction or the other. And what's interesting is that there are two types. Sort of like we are left-handed and right-handed, we also can be dominant in carbohydrates make me alkaline or carbohydrates make me acidic. And I don't know ahead of time. By looking at you, I cannot tell. So you need to actually test the foods and tell me how you respond.
Wow.
And the second thing that we answer is your endocrine dominance, of which there are 4 that we recognize: thyroid, adrenal, pituitary, and in women also ovarian or gonadal. And depending on which type you are, you will gain weight or lose weight in completely opposite ways. Like the thyroid types gain weight on starch and lose weight on fat, but the adrenals are completely the other way around. So if you want, we can get into the details of it, but that's the general gist of it. So we can tell you, here's how you lose weight and why, or gain weight if you want to know.
Oh, that is fascinating. I mean, I understood that obviously nutrition plays a big part, not just in our physical health, but also our mental and emotional well-being. But to really be able to say, this pushes you this way, this pushes you that way, here's exactly how that works for you in particular. I had no idea that we can go into such detail. 120 questions. That is fascinating. And I'm sure you learn a lot about the person filling out the quiz on that end. So, wow. Now, Martin, what got you interested in all of this? Do you want to share a little bit about maybe your own journey or your story, or how did you get connected to all of this?
Yeah, I grew up in Czechoslovakia, and when I was 24, I realized that I had to leave because the communist paradise didn't suit me any. It was a police state, and I became one of the refugees under the United Nations Charter and left. Growing up, my dad was a veterinarian. We lived in a village. We had access to great food. And I grew up believing in science and the goodness of professionals. After all, my father was one of them, and I could see him operate with a great deal of ethics. So I ended up in Canada after a year in a refugee camp in Austria, of all places. And after 90 days on a job, I ended up with fresh new medical coverage, dental included. I went to a dentist and had a checkup, and I trusted the professional with a diploma on the wall and white coat and all of that. I thought he would do right by me. So whatever he proposed, I said, okay, let's do it. Well, he proposed 12 fillings because my teeth were just in terrible shape. It puzzled me later why none of the other, 20 teeth did not need any repairs. Anyway, he sold it to me by looking at some x-rays and said, well, you can get the silver fillings. Those are included, or you can pay extra and get the white fillings. He didn't say, well, by the way, those are mercury, and mercury is the most toxic metal in the world. He didn't say any of that. So 4 sessions of 3 fillings each, 4 quadrants. And with each session, I started getting problems. Like after the first one, I had a herpes outbreak. After the second one, I ended up with some allergies. After the third one, I started getting carpal tunnel syndrome. And after the fourth one, my back went out. But I wasn't connecting it. I just didn't know. So anyway, that's the beginning of the journey. And I first went to the mainstream and the orthopedic surgeon, then to chiropractor, then to naturopathic, and then all kinds of esoteric stuff that I was chasing the problems that I was having. And all of these well-trained professionals would chase the symptoms. Not one of them was asking, and what is the cause of this? So the chiropractor would put me back together, and then I would, again, because the mercury is weakening the structural integrity of all the connective tissues, I would last a few days, and then I would be out again in pain. A few times a year, I would go so bad that I would just crawl on all fours from my rocking chair to the toilet and then crawl back. I couldn't walk. Like after 2-3 weeks, it would get good enough that I could go back to normal, but not that normal. Yeah. Anyway, that was the story. So 10 years in, I finally had this awakening, which was these people will never help you. My degree was in computer science and business administration. I'm actually an analyst. So I finally said, well, analyze this. So I got books and got into natural healing because, of course, the medical world was not helping. And I figured it out. It was the mercury. I finally clued in. I found ways to get rid of it. Zeolite helped me a lot. And So at my worst, I think I was at about 35, 36 years age. By the time I was 45, I was in great shape again. That's the story.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm always fascinated how what we end up doing, which usually turns out to be sort of our passion or what we actually love doing, is usually connected to some sort of personal experience that we've had, our own suffering, our own challenges. So yeah, that's wonderful that you found that path, and actually really great that you had this awakening that brought you into alignment with what you want to do. So that is wonderful. Not so great that you had to go through all those challenges, but they gave you clues, I guess, along the way of how it kind of all works together. So yeah.
I'm really familiar with pain, like
Yeah.
physical, debilitating, unrelenting pain. So I can relate to a lot of people because chronic inflammatory degenerative disease is really rampant. The metabolic disease that's now inflicted upon us by the industrial age, both with foods and toxins, there's a lot of it out there. And somehow the mainstream medical industry is not going after the cause. They just keep fiddling with the symptoms without ever addressing the problem at the core, at the root.
Yeah. And I would also say that that's because that's why a lot of people experience so much chronic pain, so much chronic mental health challenges. Also, obesity, obviously, being another huge part of that as well. But we're having a lot of health challenges all across the world in this day and age. So, yeah, it's unsurprising when I listen to you speak about how that all connects together. We are not addressing that root piece that we need to address. So, yeah. And so when you work with your clients and you determine the metabolic type, how do you proceed from that? So once they take the quiz and you kind of have determined, we can even take an example, if you like, of a metabolic type, if you want to go through that. How do you proceed from that? And how do you actually help them then make those changes in their lives so they can come back to a healthy self?
Well, there are essentially four legs on which illness or degeneration stands. I sort it out just for mental exercise as toxicity, malnutrition, stagnation, and trauma. And toxicity would be presence of things in your body and in your environment that should not be there, that's disrupting the normal expression of the homeostatic system in the body. And malnutrition is, again, a problem of too many calories, not enough nutrients. This is especially bad in the United States. Europe is not quite as awful, but the US has been somehow controlled by the big food and big agriculture and big pharma. And they somehow conspired through money in politics in setting the regulations in such way that the individual just is standing against almost an insurmountable problem, especially because the regulations are such that they are subsidizing foods that make you sick. The food-like objects that are highly processed foods. So the education would start there. Is first, you have to eliminate the 5 refined foods: refined flour, refined sugar, refined salt, refined oils, seed oils, and dairy. Most times, homogenization and pasteurization doesn't really help, makes it worse. So a lot of allergies and a lot of problems off of that. And so on the toxicity side, we need to get people understanding how they have to clean up. And then stagnation, that's lack of movement, lack of exercise. The lymphatic system has to be exercised, has to be moved. Otherwise, you're just rotting, sitting down. And we are quite sedentary in our modern industrial lifestyles. So we need to compensate for that quite heavily. And finally, trauma, that's where you come in. We need to get people understand that their childhood programming needs to be undone. Your mommy issues, daddy issues, brother issues, whatever else problems that you have internalized that are running your life need to be dealt with, because people are unconsciously sabotaging themselves. An example: A woman with fibromyalgia writes, I got depressed and ate a ton of Halloween candy. I feel so crappy. Okay, what caused her to move the hand from her bowl of candy to her mouth? What did it? She knows better, right? It was some traumatic event somewhere in her childhood that causes her to self-sabotage because she knows that she's going to hurt and she does it anyway. So stories, well, an example. So sometimes you have a happy deal and sometimes you have an unhappy deal. So there are these four extremes. You can be we have names for it: sympathetic, parasympathetic, fast oxidizer, slow oxidizer. A slow oxidizer wakes up acidic and is alkalized by fats. So they need to be eating the farmer's breakfast, an omelet with a piece of cheese on top and a piece of meat. Perfect. Whereas a sympathetic wakes up acidic, that means anxious and nervous and what needs to be alkalizing by carbs. So those we need to put on a fruit salad or bowl of blueberries or some sort of a thing that's going to move them toward the middle, toward less anxious. The anxiety is pretty bad. Like if you are acidic, you lose social graces, you interrupt people, you are just road rage is a good example of it. Just impatient in traffic, attacking others, all of that. And then there's the other type. So we have the parasympathetic. They wake up late, lazy, unmotivated. If you give them starchy things, they become depressed. You have to feed them the farmer's breakfast. And a slow oxidizer is the other way around. You have to feed them something carby, like a bowl of cereal or not commercial cereal. I mean, something like porridge, something of that sort. Otherwise, if you over-alkalize a person, they get depressed. If you over-acidify a person, they get into a fight. So depending which of these four you are and how you're drifting in this sphere of balanced in the middle, too acidic, too alkaline, just whatever. So we need to push people closer to better choices. And that's what you learn. Now, sometimes you're lucky and the thing that will keep you happy is also keeping you slim. But there are people who can be the other way, and things that will balance their emotional world will also put weight on them. So you'll end up with either skinny bitches or happy fat blobs.
Yes. And are we always in the same space? If I'm kind of imagining these four pieces, do we move through these? So maybe one day we wake up and we're one, but a couple of weeks later we are something different, or does this stay pretty steady throughout our lifetimes?
Yeah, most people are stable, but we do have variable types. Some women are one type before the luteal and another type after. So before ovulation, you're one type. After ovulation, you're another. So you could be a perfect vegetarian on the first 2 weeks, and you have to switch to a hunter after that. So that's one. And then some people are intraday. Morning is one type and evening is another. So what you will know is I eat some carbs and it made me calmer. Okay, carbs make me calmer. But that could be true for you in the morning and it could be not true for you in the evening. So if you're the variable, you will have that. But most people are actually quite stable. So it's reliable. Yeah. Like once we know that you're a fast oxidizer, you will always want to have a farmer breakfast, not cereal.
Now, if the things that make us calmer or happier or healthier are the things that make us put on weight, how do we deal with that? That seems like a very tough thing to deal with.
Now it becomes the narrow path through which to navigate. So you will end up, for example, okay, let's just pick a person who's a slow oxidizer and thyroid type, right? Slow oxidizer needs carbs to get motivated. Fats make them sleepy. So, okay, we will eat a breakfast that's starchy like fruit salad or something like that. We will have a lunch that's still starchy, like a salad with rice or salad with potatoes or something like that. Maybe a little bit of meat. And for dinner, we're going to push fats. And we will say, okay, eat the first two meals smaller, eat the large meal larger, the last meal larger. So that way you will push the fats, which are going to make you slimmer and are going to put you to bed.
And so when you say fats, I'm assuming there's like a certain kind of fat, because you don't want us to go out and just eat junk food, right? so some particular type of fat.
I mentioned seed oils in my list of don't touch. So it would be fruit oils, olive, coconut, palm, avocado. Those are the friendly oils. Flax oil is pretty decent too. Or butter, or lard, or tallow, all of the proteins. You see, a lot of our ancestors lived in cold climates. All of the, North Germans and Polish and Russian and all of that European heritage, those are all people who are perfectly suited to be eating a high protein diet. They don't make good vegetarians. If you, for example, if you're born in North Africa on an oasis somewhere, well, you'll be eating dates, figs, pomegranates, drinking camel milk. You'll be a carb all day long, and you'll be fine with it because your ancestors have optimized for it. So you'll be okay on that diet. But somebody with a Norwegian grandmother, not a chance. They would suffer on a diet like that.
That actually makes a lot of sense now that you say that, because I've been trying to go vegetarian on and off throughout my life, and I don't do well with it whatsoever. But of course, I have German ancestors, so there probably is a reason for that.
Yeah, with your German ancestors, you will very likely put on weight as soon as you try to be a vegetarian, and will feel weak.
Yeah.
Like there's not enough vegetables that you can eat to actually make you feel whole, satisfied. Now, if you were from India, somewhere tropical, right, where access to foods is easy year round, you don't have to store any energy. You just go out and pick it off the tree. Sure, you can be a vegetarian. It's super easy to be a tropical vegetarian. It's not that easy to be a cold weather vegetarian.
Yeah, and that is fascinating. Wow, I had no idea, but yeah, I guess our history, our genes, everything kind of plays into that a little bit.
Imagine this, Middle Ages, right? The year is 1250. A little boy is born somewhere in an alpine valley in Switzerland, and the diet will be rye bread, aged cheese, sauerkraut. On Sunday, they'll butcher the chicken, and in February, they'll kill the pig. That's the diet. So if this person is genetically matched to this, they thrive. But if they don't, well, like this. Back in Middle Ages, a woman would typically give birth to a dozen or more, but only maybe 3 or 4 made it to adulthood, to reproduction. They would die of either illnesses. Back then, they didn't have any, shall we call it, hygiene. Sewage was all over, and they just did get infected a lot. So if you're weaker and some infection comes through, well, you're gone. So that's how the population was maintained at about a steady rate, because most children did not actually make it to reproductive age.
Yeah, I can see how that works.
In the days of Roman Empire 2,000 years ago, they did not name infants until they were 2 years old. They couldn't be bothered. They lost so many.
Yeah. So we've come, it seems, a long way. We have much better hygiene, much better access to nutrition, and also access to that knowledge to actually make that work for ourselves. So one thing that we haven't touched on yet, I mean, we've talked about toxicity, malnutrition, stagnation, trauma, all the pieces that kind of come together. But what if people just say, well, Martin, I'm eating an all organic diet. Isn't that just really excellent and good enough in today's world? What happens when we kind of rely just on saying, okay, well, we're going to eat everything organic sugar, organic flour, organic this, that. Does that make anything better? Does that help us in any way?
Yes, absolutely. Eating the toxic stuff will definitely make you toxic. That part is given. right? Like if you eat grains that have been treated with glyphosate, which these days wheat, garbanzos, and lentils are just, if you don't buy those organic, you're very likely to suffer. So yes to organic, but you need to manage your emotions, right? So if eating a vegetarian organic food is making you into a crabby person, then you have to add some fats into it. That's what's going to moderate it. What will they be? Well, olive oil is great, but animal fats are so much easier to work with. And again, you want to have free range or grass-fed animals. You don't want to have feedlot corn grain-fed animals because that makes them toxic.
Yeah.
We need to go to Europe and learn how they do it. They did so much a better job. I tell you, I went to Italy on a business trip, and I cannot touch bread in the United States. No way. Well, anyway, in Italy, that's all there was. I thought, well, it's just 3 days. I'll survive. I'll just eat it. Ate the spaghetti, ate the bread. Nothing happened. So I'm asking my guest, a naturopath, explain to me this. Oh, he says, oh, grano. We grow it differently. Grain here in Italy is grown to the Roman standards. It's still the 4 foot tall, not the hybridized, and it's not covered in herbicides. It's not covered in various herbicide, pesticide, chemicals, whatever. It's still the old-fashioned 6% gluten, not the 13% gluten that we eat in America. So that's part of the answer.
Yeah.
And of course, there are thousands of chemicals that are banned in Europe that are still used in America. So let's see if we can get those out of circulation. We will be healthier for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel that it's also much more affordable in Europe to have access to healthier foods. I mean, the organic and the natural are not that much more pricey than the junk food. They're actually quite comparable. And it's something that I found was quite different in North America, Canada as well. Organic's actually quite a lot more expensive than the cheaper, more junky options. So they make it a bit easier here.
Well, let me explain. This is actually government policy. In America, there are subsidized foods. It's wheat, soy, corn, and I forget if there's another one, but these three for sure. And so any product that's made with those is artificially cheaper. So it's not that the organic food in America is more expensive. It's that the crappy food is cheaper.
Mm-hmm. So they've chosen to subsidize the more unhealthy options. Okay.
Well, I'm so hopeful that they will wake up and just say, you know what, let's just end these subsidies.
Would be better for our health. Absolutely. Yeah. So when you do the metabolic typing for your clients, they take a quiz, but do you also run other tests? Do you run any lab tests or blood tests or anything like that to help determine what type they are? Or is this just strictly based on the quiz that they take?
You know, what's interesting is that we find that I can run a toxicity test, right? Heavy metals test or whatever. But these days, everybody's toxic. I don't even have to run a test to know that you're toxic. Likewise, I can run a whole bunch of allergy type of tests, which foods you're not supposed to be eating. But the problem is this: when your gut is dysregulated, when the microbiome is dysregulated, you tend to have this permeable bowel, which causes allergies. So if we fix the gut, if we start with the microbes, we start with the closing all the gaps, you actually stop being allergic to many things because the inner terrain will get right. So I tell people, look, you can go the medical route. You can spend $6,000, $3,000 of it on testing and $3,000 on your appointments, but you will not be farther ahead just following the route that I'm proposing, which is way more affordable.
That makes a lot of sense. There's, I think, a disproportionate amount of people that are now allergic to all sorts of things. Some common things, like you said, bread or even honey and just like really common things. So that makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned that their gut is just not in a healthy state. And it wouldn't be surprising with our diet and nutrition the way it is that happens. So that's very interesting that we can start by working on that, and then we kind of start having benefits coming from that. Okay, that makes sense. Now, how can people work with you, Martin, if our listeners have been inspired and kind of curious about what we've been talking about, and they think that they're probably toxic because Martin said pretty much everyone's toxic. So, and they would like to work with you. What kind of programs and services do you offer? How can our listeners work with you?
Right. Well, we're a multifaceted business. We have our in-house manufacturing facility where we build superfood blends. So that's the malnutrition part. We actually help people compensate for the deficiency in the food. And then we have a whole lot of other products on the website. The list is, the link is in the notes, life-enthusiast.com. And you can find products that will fit to fill the gaps, right? Like we find the person wherever they are. And, so we start fixing all of it. I mentioned the malnutrition, stagnation, and trauma, and one other, I forget which I didn't say. The point is, it's sort of like the wheels on your car. Which of these four wheels is the important one? The answer is obvious. You cannot drive a car with any one of them missing or blown or whatever. So we have to fix all of it, not just part of it. So we start going around in circles, fixing all the gaps, and they start presenting themselves. So if you have high inflammation, we need to find out, is it because of the presence of the toxins, or are you allergic to specific foods? Shall we fix the gut? If the gut is bad, the liver has been suffering for some time. We have to support the liver, and so on. So it's in layers and layers. And it's best if people just show up and give us a call and give us their status, and we start working on it, one thing at a time. It usually takes about a year to reverse a serious problem, but people will start feeling better on week 2 or 3.
Yeah. And I feel like an investment like that is an investment in your own health. So it's something that is extremely important if you want to move away from chronic pain, chronic illness, any of those things that you might be experiencing, even mental health challenges, like you mentioned, the anxiety, which is a common thing people experience today, is a lot of anxiety and stress. So yeah, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah, there's one other serious contributor to anxiety. Wi-Fi triggers what's known as the calcium-gated voltage channels. And what happens is when you get into, especially 5G, but even 4G does it, a lot of it, is it will start affecting your cells and they start releasing calcium. And calcium is the signaling molecule for anxiety, for fight or flight, the stress side of things.
That is a fascinating connection. Okay. Because people are always saying, oh, Wi-Fi is really bad for you. But now there actually is kind of a scientific way to address that. Okay. Yeah.
A physiological explanation of how it actually happens.
Yeah. Now, if you can't get out of Wi-Fi, say you have to do it for work or you have to be in it for particular reasons, can we work to counter that at all?
Yeah. My favorite gadget is made by a company called Blue Shield, which is a little broadcasting tool. It sends out scalar waves that are reminding the autonomic nervous system to stay calm. It's sort of like, if you have a dog barking in your home, the dog is barking because there's somebody at the door. You can tell the dog, this is Aunt Martha, just sit down, this is good. And the dog will calm down. Likewise, with this autonomic nervous system, if I send it the signal that says, peace, relax, heal, peace, relax, heal, all day long, then the presence of those irritable or irritating signals will not really get the upper hand. So that's what I'm using. I have one of those things sitting just over here out of sight, playing all day long.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's fascinating because a lot of us obviously spend our work days surrounded or immersed in Wi-Fi and we don't really have much of a choice or we can't work. So yeah, that's a great solution to help us balance that out. And I do feel like a lot of people tell me they're experiencing anxiety, even sometimes for no reason. So this could be one of those situations where we're kind of covered in Wi-Fi all day long and our cells are just going crazy, releasing all our calcium. So, yeah.
I remember talking to a client. She says, I'm driving towards downtown where they have the smart grid. And as I enter, a wave of anxiety washes over me. Right? Like she's one of the more electrosensitive and goes like that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's all connected. Everything comes together when it comes to our health. And of course, Martin also has his own podcast called Life Enthusiast. So you can jump over there, listen in from your favorite podcast provider, and get some more information and some more details on, I'm assuming, some of the things that we talked about today, you probably also have talked about on your podcast in greater detail. So you can hop on over there and check out a few episodes of The Life Enthusiast. And we'll be linking to that in the show notes for you as well. And of course, we'll be linking to all of Martin's other offerings in the show notes as well. So be sure to check there for how you can connect with him. If you'd like to find out what your metabolic type is or how you can begin healing the pieces that we talked about today, then be sure to check that on how you can connect with Martin and start working with him. And this works sort of globally. People don't really need to live where you are, correct? This kind of works all over the world.
Yeah, universal.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing this time with me today. It's been a privilege hosting you on the show today because I feel like we've covered so much important information and brought some things to attention that people may not have been quite aware of or been thinking of when it comes to their health. So thank you so much for being here today, Martin, and sharing your wisdom and knowledge, which you have such a vast amount of knowledge on this topic. Thank you for sharing that with us today. It's been truly a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Happy to do it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Martin, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.